Bonjour, hi, Canada. We're playing your song because your prime minister might resign today. Doing my show prep. Canada's prime minister faces calls to resign. Here's what could happen next. This is from the AP this morning. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces growing pressure to resign from his own Liberal Party after his top minister abruptly quit, criticizing his handling of the budget. Trudeau has led the country for nearly a decade and has become widely unpopular in recent years over a wide range of issues, including the high cost of living and rising inflation. There is no mechanism for Trudeau's party to force him out. In the short term, he could resign, or his party could be forced from power by a no-confidence vote in Parliament that would trigger an election that would likely favor the opposing Conservative Party. He's been having a rough go of it. The new president-elect in the United States, Donald Trump, is using him as a Bobo doll. About 3 hours ago, President-elect Trump posted at Truth Social I can't use my tweet anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. Can you play the old tweet? So from 2016 or 15 until after the change from Twitter to X, I would always announce a Donald Trump tweet with that music, as suggested to me by the one and only Jan Genera. By the way, if you need a Christmas stocking present, here it is. Go and get yourself Turning Small Talk into Big Talk by Jan Genera over at Jan's Books. But Jan came up with that, and I used it for years, and people liked it. But it doesn't work anymore because the President of the United States doesn't tweet, he posts. So his post at 3:23 this morning, East Coast time, on Truth Social. No one can answer why we subsidize Canada to the tune of over $100 million a year. Makes no sense. Many Canadians want Canada to become the 51st state. They would save massively on taxes and military protection. I think it's a great idea. 51st state. Well, the Canadians really don't want to become a 51st state. I was listening to the Ruthless podcast yesterday, and they're having great fun with this. We could gerrymander Canada. We could, put Montreal and Toronto together in one congressional district and grant that congressional district observer rights in the House, but carve it out of the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada is pretty normal, but you put Montreal and Toronto together, and you've got Vermont. And we don't need another Vermont. We really don't. We need Pierre, how do I say his last name?
You're never going to get this name right. It's Polyev.
No, I'm not. Polyev. Pierre Polyev. Polyev. And he gave a speech this week. This is help is on the way. Understand, help is on the way for Donald Trump. He's got a friend in Japan. He's got a friend in Italy. He's going to get a friend in Germany. Macron's just kind of, nobody cares. Keir Starmer's a failure. We don't really want any help from him. But he's going to get some help in Canada. Here's Pierre, cut number 19.
When I travel across this country, I consistently meet two types of people. One, those who are a little better off and tell me that, and I'll be very blunt about this, that if I don't win, they will leave the country. And they are very numerous. Yes. But I don't worry about them as much. You know who I worry about? The ones who can't leave. The ones who don't know, and if I can just use very blunt language, who tell me I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I have no idea how I'm going to pay my way. That's right. I met a waitress at a restaurant not long ago, and she came up to me and she grabbed me by the hand and she said, "You have to win." And I said, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate your support." She said, No. It wasn't a compliment. You have to win. And then she told me her story. She told me that she was working one full-time job and two part-time jobs just to pay her bills. As a single woman in her late 50s. And she was tired of working all the time. So she cut everything out of her budget, every creature comfort, everything she enjoyed about her life, she cut it out so that she could drop one of those part-time jobs. And then one morning, she woke up And she walked outside, and her car was gone. And she called her insurance, and they said they weren't going to cover the replacement value. So she had to take that job back because she simply cannot live her life without a car. Now you can bet your bottom dollar the guy who stole the car, he was probably out on bail. This was not his first job.
That's right.
Her taxes have gone up. Her heating bill has gone up. Her wages have not gone up. She's scared to go out in the streets in places where they didn't even lock the door not long ago. These are the people we're fighting for. These silly games over here, they're very entertaining. The soap opera that everyone's seized with today, that's all fine. But there are real people whose lives are on the line here, and we have a duty to work for them. And quite frankly, this woman doesn't see me as any, or any of us as any kind of savior. They see us all as a last hope. In fact, she doesn't want to be saved. She just wants her life back.
Exactly.
She was taking care of herself just fine before her tax, her heat, her grocery bill went through the roof and her car went missing. She was doing just fine. She was doing everything right. Met another guy at the Le Brat Brewery a few days ago, and you can watch the video of me talking with him. He walked up to me and he said, I have 3 jobs and I can't make it. We're renting. We have no hope. We've given up on ever owning a home. We're renting. We can barely make it. And he said to me, I feel ashamed when I talk to my kids because they ask me why I'm never around and why we can never have a house. And I feel like a failure. But he didn't fail. He has been failed.
That's right.
He has been robbed of the promise of Canada. It was a very simple promise, that if you worked hard, you got a good life. Now, it wasn't fancy or extravagant, but you got a house with a yard where you could have kids playing safely, and you could have a nice dog that you could afford to feed along with the kids, and your kids could play safely in the streets. That was the promise. Now, politicians break promises all the time. But you know what was bad about this promise? This promise didn't belong to this Prime Minister. It wasn't his promise to break. It belonged to all of us. And our purpose is to bring home that promise for that young man, that young father, and that older female worker so that they can once again take back control of their lives, live in a safe country where their hard work earns them a good wage, where their rent and their food is affordable, and where when they go to bed at night, they know that they will be safe throughout their sleep and that they will have their car in their driveway in the morning. A country where people are proud again to fly the flag, where they know the government is a servant and not a master, where they understand that every day the Commons, this place, works for the common people, not for the ego of one man desperate to cling on to his job. We must remember that we are
that one man
servants in
would
this
be Justin Trudeau, and by the end of the today, he may be gone. I will talk with Continetti. We do not have a great bench right now. The president-elect of the United States is not looking at a lot of help. He's got Maloney in Italy on his side and Ishiba in Japan, and they're sort of realist. He's burdened with Trudeau and Scholz, who's going to get blown out, I think, in February. He's burdened by Starmer in the United Kingdom, who's at 22% approval. Macron, again, I got nothing. Now, on the other hand, we do have Malay, and Argentina is not part of the G7, but Malay is proving things. He's proving things in Argentina, proof of concept in Argentina, where you can indeed cut the public sector, you can indeed lay off lots and lots of government employees, you can indeed use executive authority within the constitutional structure of Argentina, different from ours, to get a lot done. But if Justin Trudeau goes down today will be a very good day. I did special report last night. I'll be doing it again tonight. It will be a very good day if we're talking about the fall of Justin Trudeau by the end of today. I don't know that it's going to happen, but it's the big story of the morning. There's a couple other stories, but the Democratic Party is in a very bad way right now, as is the Liberal Party, the Labour Party up in Canada, led by Justin Trudeau. The left just has failed worldwide, and people have noticed, and Americans noticed in November, and we are ready for Donald Trump to kind of be president right now. It's a long 35 days ahead of America. I hope you've entered to join the Salem media contest to give away 2 tickets to the presidential inauguration, 2 tickets to the inaugural ball, expense paid, to D.C. for a trip for 2. All you have to do is text the name Trump to 94878. That's Trump, Trump, 94878. Also, hope you've given to Angel Tree. Thank you to the thousands who've already contributed. We have another week to go where we can, for every $30, we will get a gift under the tree from mom or dad in jail with a note from them, gift selected by the child. They'll also get a visit by an Angel Tree volunteer and a youth Bible connection up to Angel Tree. Give a listen to Stacy Campbell, who is the volunteer for Prison Fellowship.
And it was a little boy answered the door and I said, "Oh, here's a gift from your dad." And it was just this, oh, he remembered me. And I think the whole gift kind of fades into the background. It's that connection and that realization that I belong and my friends are having Christmas, but I'm having Christmas too. I'm worthy as a little kid. And that's the part that doesn't leave you.
It doesn't leave you, and I thank you. For those of you who are doing 30, 60, some of you want to take care of 5 kids and you send in $150. The banner's at the top of HughHewitt.com. You can also call 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764. But I think it's easiest to go to the top of the newly redesigned, by the way. HughHewitt.com has been totally overhauled by the tech team in Tennessee, and you have to kind of navigate around, but it's really kind of cool. Head over to HughHewitt.com. I am, however, worried that the Tribbles are upset, Generalissimo. I got a notice last night that they are angry with you for refusing to return the after show.
Not going to happen.
When we go back to the afternoon.
Not going to happen.
I'm just relaying to you.
You had one person say that.
I have the torch lit parade was outside last night.
No, you had one person.
Dwayne.
You had one person.
Dwayne's World. They want you back.
No,
after
there is
the
no
show.
they. It's one.
They were drinking together last night and they're making a lot of noise online. I'm just telling you.
Colby, our Canadian friend, sorry, not going to happen.
864 1900. That's
864
644
1900.
That does not connect you to Colby, our Canadian friend. That connects you to my PhD.
So you admit it was one person.
No, I admit that Colby is our Canadian friend.
Yes.
And he actually knows a lot about defense, which might be the only guy in Canada who does. 864
644
1900. That's to my PhD weight loss. That's the sponsor. Dwayne lost 50 pounds with it 2 years ago. He's kept it off. Go to myphdweightloss.com. As the holidays loom and you're about to start eating everything in sight, Christmas cooking. There are no gingerbread men in the house.
We were in Trader Joe's last night, by the way. I actually saw the offending box that you're referring to.
They put them pretty far out, don't they?
They do, and
They do not have a lot of mercy on people.
No, it is like a 5-day tsunami of carbs in one box.
And they're so winsome looking. They're little ginger people, right?
Yes.
They're
yes.
gender neutral ginger people.
Yes.
Tarzana Joe wants nothing to do with being involved in the gender wars. But I did get the note. Lots of people want the after show back. I'm just saying.
Lots of people being one.
Well, Colby speaks for many people. And
he's in Canada. No, he doesn't, by definition.
He's going to be one of our co-citizens if Donald Trump has his way. He wants Greenland and Canada now. But we do not want Montreal and Toronto. We don't. And we're laying down the law here. They can be a protectorate. They can be a Commonwealth of Canada surrounded by a state. Or we could add Vermont. That way they could have Bernie Sanders. They already have socialized medicine, and it doesn't work. So they could have Bernie Sanders. Joined by Matt Continetti of the Washington Free Beacon, the Commentary Podcast and Magazine, and, of course, head of domestic studies at American Enterprise Institute. Good Wednesday to you, Matt. I have a question for you. Do you remember, are you old enough to recall the name Charles Manat?
No.
Charles Manat became the chairman of the Democratic National Committee in 1981. He served for 4 years. He was then succeeded by Paul Kirk, who served for 4 years, who was then succeeded by Ron Brown, who served for 4 years. 12 years the Democrats were in the presidential desert after the terrible presidency of Jimmy Carter. Do you think they're looking at that now?
They may be facing something similar to that, Hugh, only because the names being floated for that position, chair of the DNC, are as random and anonymous as the name that you asked me if I recognized just a moment ago. So that's a bad sign for the Democratic Party. It is a bad sign. It suggests that no one wants that job, or the Democrats really don't know how to respond to Trump's victory. And I would say, too, that when you listen to Kamala Harris's speech in Maryland yesterday, her kind of resurfacing after the election, she doesn't seem to have learned anything either. The message was the same. Even the laugh was the same.
Well, and AOC lost to O'Connell yesterday when in the leadership race for the Oversight Committee. So maybe they're not willing to go completely crazy. However, here's my proposition, Matt. Tear it apart. When you have an inflationary presidency like Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden, one that is marked by inflation at home and retreat abroad, with Carter it was the Iranian Revolution, the Soviets invading Afghanistan, Cubans all over Africa. Under Biden, it's Afghanistan and Ukraine and 10-7. There are stark similarities between Carter and Biden's 4 years. And the memory of disastrous presidencies don't leave in a hurry. Do you think that's the real problem here, is that Biden's been so bad, it's an anchor on the Democratic Party for a long time to come?
Biden has been bad. It has been an anchor on the Democratic Party, an anchor that the Democrats refuse to acknowledge still. Maybe that will change after Biden leaves office. I also think, though, a missing ingredient is success. So you're right, Carter's presidency was terrible, but just as important as the awfulness of Carter's presidency was the success of Ronald Reagan's policy. So Carter created inflation. Reagan, though it was painful in that first term, was able to solve the inflation and provide stable prices with a growing economy. Carter really eroded American deterrence. Reagan restored it through his defense buildup, through his projection of power, and then ultimately through the Strategic Defense Initiative, forcing the Soviets to the negotiating table. So I think that the memory of Biden will linger, especially among younger voters. But I think it's also important, Hugh, that the Trump administration achieve its goals and not get distracted from its mission. There are two primary goals here. Well, I'll say three. One is securing the border. Two is restoring the economy. And three is restoring American deterrence in the world.
And a lot of that has to do with a rather intangible, restoring some optimism, some being upbeat, looking forward in America. I played the Canadian opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. I can't say his name. It's going to take me forever. His speech in the Parliament yesterday, because Justin Trudeau may fall today, and last night at 3:30 in the morning, Donald Trump was calling on Canada to become the 51st state again. It's really pretty remarkable how badly Canada is being run right now. But compared to Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan went to his first G7, he was greeted by Prime Minister Suzuki of Japan, Helmut Schmidt in Germany, Pierre Trudeau in Canada, Mitterrand in France, Margaret Thatcher in England, and Giovanni Spaldolini, who I do not remember at all, in Italy. Compare that with Justin Trudeau, Helmut Schultz, Keir Starmer, and Macron. Now, we do have Maloney, and we do like Ashiba, but I mean, Trump's pretty much on his own here, isn't he?
He is, but I would also add he's on his own for now. And whether it's Canada, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, whether it's the UK, where Starmer just won the election, but he's incredibly unpopular already, whether it's South Korea and the mess there, the democratic world seems to be in a period of transition. And the transition leans in one direction. It is a rejection of the left. It is a rejection of the climate policies that have led to deindustrialization and economic stagnation. It's a rejection of the elitism of many of these left-wing governments. It's a rejection, I'd say, of kind of the foreign policies of some of these left-wing governments as well. And of course, it's a rejection of the migration. And so I think the wave hit the United States here in November, but it's a global wave. And I think that should only concentrate our leaders' minds on the two key goals. One is doing something about the border, and the other is something about inflation. But more important than even getting inflation under control is getting incomes to rise again. And you can't do that, Hugh, with these ridiculous green policies that Western governments have been pursuing for decades.
You anticipated my next comment. This morning, the Financial Times has a story that reads, "The future of America's natural gas export boom has been thrown into doubt after a federal government report found the unbridled expansion would hurt American consumers and global climate goals. A long-awaited," again, this is a quote, "a long-awaited Department of Energy study." Now, frankly, I've never known of a long-awaited Department of Energy study, but this is what the Financial Times said. Released on Tuesday, said that the industry's continued rapid growth, this is our own natural gas, risked driving up domestic fuel prices, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and supporting China. So Jennifer Granholm has put out a report that says, don't do the liquefied natural gas. It's only going to hurt you, America. Is that the kind of green idiocy you're talking about, Matt?
It's exactly the type of green idiocy I'm talking about, Hugh. Long awaited. I'm sure the green groups, the environmental radicals, were awaiting it because I bet you they had advance notice it was going to happen. And so they were waiting to seize on it to say that we should move away from LNG. We should move away from being an energy exporter and move toward the solar and wind and all of these kind of boondoggles that the left has been pursuing now for years. I think the report is also a reminder of what we avoided in the past election. If Kamala Harris had won the election, Hugh, this report would have been the basis of her second-term energy policy. If Harris had won the election, America would be headed down the path of this very same countries where we see such political turbulence and rejection of the status quo. So I think America was dodged a bullet in November. Trump, of course, was hit by a bullet in July.
Quite literally got hit by a bullet, but dodged being
right.
killed.
And
yeah.
we dodged a bullet in the election. And so this affords us an opportunity to go down a different path and to continue America's remarkable success when compared with the rest of the world because of our exceptional nature and our exceptional resources and our talent, but also avoid the fate of these other democracies, which just have kind of slid into despondency because of the left-wing ideology that we see on display in that report.
Well, I want to read this line again because I want to know how in the world anyone can write it. A long-awaited Department of Energy study released on Tuesday said that the industry's continued rapid growth risked driving up domestic fuel prices, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and supporting China. I don't know how they got there, Matt, but it seems to me they probably said we want to reach the conclusion that LNG means higher prices, helping China and global warming. How do we get there? It doesn't make, how can more domestic production of LNG drive up energy prices? It's stupid.
You would think that FT would understand, and I'm sure many people there do understand that when you increase supply, cost goes down, price goes down. I mean, it's pretty simple. And look, I think that the incoming Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, the incoming Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, they understand that. And so the first thing the incoming Trump administration is going to do, Hugh, is take this report that you mentioned and put it into the trash bin. I'm not even sure they're going to recycle it. They're going to dislike it that much. They'll just put it in the trash bin.
Now, what do you think about Justin Trudeau and Trump's continued teasing of him? I do think he might fall today, if I'm reading this right. Dwayne tells me that his coalition partners don't want to lose the vote of no confidence because they got to go 2 more months to get their pensions. But What do you, I mean, will it even matter if Pierre Poilievre is the prime minister in Canada?
Oh, I think it will matter. I mean, look, you mentioned Reagan's first G7, and soon after, Trudeau was replaced by Mulroney, and Reagan and Brian Mulroney got along fabulously, right? And so it's good to have the governments of our allies, especially our North American allies, in sync and sharing a similar worldview. So if Trudeau goes and is replaced by the center right leader, then I think it would be a great thing. It's funny, the teasing of Trudeau. At first, people thought it was just kind of Trump being humorous and giving us all a reason to laugh. And now, though, it's persisted, and I actually think there is a political dimension to it. I think Trump understands that the more he kind of teases Trudeau, calls him governor, refers to Canada as the great state of Canada, that actually weakens Trudeau's position, and it may help Trump in the end by getting him a leader in the head of Canada who is more open to the MAGA movement and the center right.
He's the great diminisher. Now, Matt, I have a big question. We may have to go into the break about this. AOC lost her chance to be the top oversight committee, but I combine that with this. You've seen the ratings for CNN and MSNBC, right? I heard you talking about them on the commentary podcast yesterday. John is marveling, John Podhoretz is marveling that the commentary podcast actually has more listeners than CNN does viewers in the demo. Here's the story from Fox News. Fox News Digital Post, best month since 2020, crushing CNN and the New York Times. They had 4.5 billion minutes across all their brands compared to 1.8 billion minutes for CNN and 1.5 billion for the New York Times. That's a rout. And I'm going to come back during the break and ask Matt what that means, because it's a rout. And I don't know that Democrats haven't lost the means of production. That is, they don't have anywhere people can go to learn anything. So I'm back with Matt Continetti. Matt, proposition, the media landscape has changed such that Democrats don't realize how this alternative ecosystem, whether it's Fox News Digital, commentary podcast, all of the talk radio world, whether it's Dan Cino, et cetera, it's all wiped out the left's ability to control the narrative, and they're not getting it back soon. True or false?
Oh, absolutely true. And this is the difference that technology makes, Hugh. When you look at the numbers of the growth of YouTube, for example, you see that this technology, allowing basically everyone on the planet Earth to become a television producer, has completely changed the face of media. I mean, the young people I know, the young people in my house, for them, television doesn't exist. It's all YouTube. It's all streaming. And I think that is finally catching up with the mainstream culture at large, where people are not looking to cable news to learn what's going on. They're going to YouTube. They're going to podcasts, and they're getting information, but they're also getting it perspective and analysis from people that, on the one hand, they trust, and on the other two, seem more approachable, I think, and seem more relatable, maybe even a little bit more humorous than kind of the stuffed shirts you see on cable and on CNN.
Matt, last question. I had lunch this week with a member of Elite Media, Legacy Media at the very top. He could not believe that the commentary podcast came out 5 days a week and that it was basically an editorial board. And he never heard of the Ruthless podcast. Never heard of it. And he was disbelieving that you folks sit down, the 3 or 4 or 5 of you at commentary, and do an editorial roundtable disbelieving. And I found myself stunned that he didn't know about either commentary or Ruthless. What do you react that way? And I mean a very senior Legacy Media person.
Yeah. I'm stunned that I do that for 5 hours a week as well. So I don't entirely blame him. But this is what I mean, is that the cost of production of the commentary podcast is very low. It really is.
What?
It's
you mean they're not paying you millions of dollars?
5 people. I don't have Rachel Maddow's contract, that's for sure. And it's 5 people on Riverside talking for an hour, and yet people love to hear it, and it's just
and we
when
want
I'm
more.
talking to you, right?
More.
I mean, so this is the new medium. Podcast, I think, amplified and changed the shape of radio, but now they're moving into video, and that I think is going to seriously undercut cable and the mainstream media's influence over opinion, especially the opinions of the rising generation of young people. And I think we saw that in the election with the shift among young people toward Donald Trump in 2024.
I got 34% of the young people, Matt. 34%. I lost by 30%. I got 34%. He was in command. It's going to be a wild ride for 4 years. But Matt Continetti, thank you for joining me. I look forward to the commentary podcast this morning. Give some thought. Charles Manat, how long will the Democrats be in exile? 12 years? I think that's a reasonable guess. Thank you, Matt Continetti. Follow him at Continetti on X and listen to the commentary podcast. Stay tuned. I am feeling pretty good about things in terms of where the country is going, because I thought Donald Trump was totally in command at his press conference 2 days ago. I am worried about the world stage because Xi is a lot smarter than anybody else that Trump has in his team. So it's Xi, Putin, who's not particularly smart but very brutal, Khamenei, who's a fanatic, and Kim Jong-un, plus their allies around the world, versus the G7. And we've got Trump and we've got Maloney, but we need some help. We need a lot of help for the West. The West needs a lot of help. Let me talk to you about the wild adventure. Our friends at twa.us want me to remind you, if you want to give the perfect Christmas present for a young man 21 to 35, give them a scholarship to the wild adventure. It never fails to. They have a wonderful time. The young guys have a wonderful time at Rainbow Lake. The older guys go over to the Smiling Moose Lodge. I think it's sold out for the older people who are over 35, but there are a few places left for young men to go and spend the best week of your life. If you run the video a little bit, Harley, you can just take a look on the Salem News Channel at the guys and the setting, and you'll say, I want to do that. I may want to go with my brother. I may want to go with my best pal. Maybe a wife wants to send a husband, or a mom send a son, but they do have a great time. It is not a Bible study. It is a fishing trip that has a great infrastructure built around it, led by good Christian men, but it's not about going to church. It's about going up in the mountains and having a great time in Montana. twa.us. Give it a look-see, please. Also want you to know, I'm not sure that conservatives for lower health care costs have won or lost. The CR came out last night on the House side, and there's some language in it about pharmacy benefit managers, and I think Big Pharma won. I can't tell for sure. Head over to pharmawindfall.com. We are sponsored by Conservatives for Lower Health Care Costs. I didn't really think that Big Pharma had a shot, but I never should underestimate how much money they put into lobbying. Big Tech really don't know how to do it yet, but Big Pharma has been doing it for 50 years. And so they went after, they trained their sights on the pharmacy benefit managers. And I do not know what's in the bill. It was published last night late. I don't know if the AM radio in every car act made it into the CR. It's become somewhat bigger than I expected it to be. But if you want to find out what we're trying to stop, maybe the Senate will have to stop it and say, no, we're not going to give away billions of dollars to Big Pharma. Because whatever the House passes still needs to get through the Senate. Head over to pharmawindfall.com. I don't think it's good politics for Republicans to be giving the pharmaceutical companies a lot of money. I think it's good politics or good policy to go after the PMBs, and I hope the Senate stops it if that has in fact happened. In the meantime, let me check over at our friends at American Federal, who are our gold people. And I know I wrote it down. There it is. AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Gold is at $2,665 an ounce. The 10-year Treasury is at 4.4. If you're going to buy gold for Christmas, I'm not too sure you want to go to the jewelry store right now. I would guess that the cost of gold has made everything pretty doggone expensive. You may want to give flowers this year or clothing. You may want to avoid the gold unless you're buying it in ounces for your children or your grandchildren, in which case you want to call Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. The Dow is down 0.61 yesterday. The S&P down 0.39. The NASDAQ down 0.32. S&P down 0.39. Gold, however, stayed right there, 2,665. It floats around a few dollars here and a few dollars there, but it's fixed. And the 10-year Treasury is at 4.4, so inflation has not been vanquished. The only way to get rid of inflation is to produce energy. Energy is freedom. Keep the interest rates low. I'm not too sure the Feds are going to go much further than they're going to go this week. They might lop off another quarter point this week, but I think that's going to be it until domestic energy production picks up. And so your gold, inflation hasn't gone away, so your gold isn't going to go down. All I know is I do not make economic predictions because I'm not an economist, but I do know that gold has more than kept pace with inflation for more than 50 years, and more than 100 years, in fact. And you can call Nick Grovich and his team at 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. I was on Special Report last night, and we did talk about the drones. And I said this, cut number 12.
You know, days and days of this, Hugh, on this drone story. But it is something that people are really interested in and obviously very concerned about.
And an information vacuum has developed. It's not a good time for the President of the United States to be invisible, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense. Admiral Kirby does a good job, but it's not good enough. Secretary Mayorkas is not persuasive. Had Senator Cotton on my radio show this morning, said we want a briefing, we need a briefing. And when you have, the good news is that Donald Trump stepped up yesterday and gave a fairly comprehensive view of the drone situation, which I think was actually the adult in the room, to borrow the cliche, was Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago saying, we know what's going on, don't worry. I'm glad he did that. I'm very glad he did that. I'm not paying a lot of attention to the drone story because there's nothing I can do about it. And there's nothing that I can add to the story because the story is so amorphous. But I do think Donald Trump did reassure a lot of people 2 days ago when he said, yeah, we can follow them right into their garage if we want to. That's what we actually need from Joe Biden, and we're not getting. It is a slow season of news, but it is also a season of rapid change in politics. And that's because the transition is moving forward. President-elect Trump held his first press conference 2 days ago. The waves from that press conference are continuing to ripple out. Joe Biden has retreated to the beach. Kamala Harris is irrelevant, and what she has to say, I might play a couple clips from her, makes no sense. And Democrats are really in a funk. And the reality is they don't even know how bad it is. They do not know how they are boxed out of the narrative. By that I mean, there was a time when even when Democrats lost an election, they could still count on legacy media coming back and helping them recover. That time is no more because legacy media is disintermediated from its audience. That sounds like a mouthful. Let me read to you a story from Brian Flood at Fox News that was published 2 days ago. Fox News Digital posts best month since 2020, crushing CNN and New York Times during November's election. Fox News saw staggering growth on YouTube with 400 million video views. All right, now this is something, by the way, that we are also experiencing at the Hugh Hewitt Show, but I read on. Americans flocked to Fox News Digital for information and analysis in November as the news site picked up its most impressive month since the last presidential election 4 years ago. Fox News Digital had its best month since November 2020, leading news brands among both multi-platform views and minutes, according to ComScore. Fox News Digital piled up 4.5 billion multi-platform minutes to lead all news brands, a 57% increase compared to November of last year. CNN managed only 1.8 billion multi-platform minutes, and the New York Times earned 1.5 billion, with both outlets losing multi-platform minutes compared to November 2023. So you see what's happening on the big three, New York Times, CNN, and Fox News. FoxNews.com is soaring. The other two are crashing. Meanwhile, if you look at the cable rating, MSNBC is horrific, but not as bad as CNN, which is scary. CNN is down. As I mentioned to Matt Continetti last hour, I listened to the commentary podcast yesterday. They went over the CNN numbers, and they realized that the commentary podcast has more downloads than CNN does demo viewers in prime time. And Ruthless podcast yesterday went over the same numbers, and the fellows are struck that they dominate CNN and MSNBC. I might add, this is going to accelerate. We're always changing here. HughHewitt.com changed completely overnight. If you go there yesterday and you go there today, you're going to find it's completely reassembled and done in a way that appeals to a younger demo that gets all the information out there. Our YouTube subscriptions are heading up to 75,000, and they didn't exist 3 months ago. We just made some changes to develop that. I'm moving to the afternoons. That's always good after 8 years to move a slot. And the reason I tell you is that everybody migrates with you via the podcast. So folks who are used to listening to me in the morning, they'll just go get the podcast from the night before, which will be posted every day at 7 p.m. in the East, 4 in the West, and then people can play it in the morning workout or on their drive to work in the morning. But your listeners follow you, and new listeners arrive in a new time slot. So it's always good to move every few years. That's one of the new rules. It used to be, don't ever move, don't change anything. That's not true anymore. Now you want to move around. Now you want to find new audiences. Now you want to expand in affiliates from 450 to 900. That's what I want to do. But I am very glad to be on the move. I want you to know, though, the cluelessness with which legacy media is being swamped. I always go back to the horrific scenes from the tsunami in Sri Lanka and other countries from a decade and more ago. People are just sitting on the beach, and then they see the water go out, and they don't really know what's going on, and then the tsunami comes in and it destroys everything in front of them. The water going out, in this analogy, are ratings. So the audience for CNN, MSNBC, legacy news outlets generally, for the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Daily Times is deader than a doornail. Their number, the wave went out, and they've seen their subscription revenue fall. They've seen their audience eyeballs fall. Their revenue's going to fall. What is coming in? Well, I am been getting bigger every single year of my 25 years because radio is now also video. So some of you are watching on the Salem News Channel. Some of you are listening via podcast. Some of you are listening live on your drive to work. The wave that is coming in is not just me and Mike Gallagher, Chris DeGaulle taking over my slot in the morning on Morning Drive in the East. It's not just the great one, Mark Levin, in the afternoon drive. It's not just Larry Elder. It's everybody, but it's also podcasting. Now, last night on Special Report, we played a little clip of the Pod Save America bros, the Obama bros, wailing and gnashing of teeth. They were so upset that Democrats are getting their hats handed to them. And Megan Hayes, who was my co-panelist last night, said this is part of the problem. These guys are part of the problem. Because Megan is a center-left Democrat. I've got Chris Coons coming up later in the hour, center-left Democrat from Delaware. And she said the Obama bros are way out there on the left, and the country's just not. It's okay to be a leftist. We're not coming to hunt you down or anything like that. You're not going. You might have been told that by your crazy friends, but no. In fact, the country's a free country, and nothing's changing. But the left doesn't understand. America does not want an open border. America does not like inflation. America rejects the idea of trans ideology. America wants its schools to work. Americans want their taxes to be low. And they don't want to be pushed around. It's not really that hard. But the left is selling, and they're selling more, and they don't realize people have just turned off the old media. They're just not listening anymore. They're watching Brett. Let me give you a little taste of what we were doing last night. Let's go to cut number 13. Here I am talking with Brett about Donald Trump.
Wall Street Journal, the Jerry Baker says Trump is back, this time without disdain. Just as his domestic critics have gotten in line, so the world has saluted more or less reluctantly his restoration. Only a few presidents changed the political weather by their very election. John F. Kennedy presaged the social and political transformation of the 1960s. Ronald Reagan in 1980 announced the arrival of a new political economy for the West 5 weeks before his inauguration. Mr. Trump's new order is well underway. And it really was interesting and a different take on that news conference. We hadn't seen a news conference in a long time.
Over a year for Joe Biden. More, and even more than a news conference that was the wild news conference where everyone's shouting. It's not someone being called on by name with pre-prepared questions. And he was completely in command. And I thought, what a refreshing change. And his approval rating is 55%, which is the highest he's ever had. 8 years ago, it was 40%. The difference, of course, he's done the job. People are not afraid of him anymore. And they're not buying the legacy media narrative that Donald Trump is a dangerous fascist authoritarian. It's been rejected. It's been utterly, completely spit out. And the people who are peddling it are talking to each other. They're not listening. And I go back to the story I just told Matt Continetti. I had lunch this week with a nice guy who's at the very top of one of the legacy media operations. And we're not arguing with each other. We're just comparing notes. And I said, do you listen to Ruthless? He said, no, what's that? And I told him, well, it's the four fellas. And they wield this enormous influence in the center-right space. Said, did you know Commentary does a podcast 5 days a week? Huh? 5 days a week? I said, yes, indeed. They sit down and they shoot the breeze 5 days a week. They slap it together. The production costs are very low, and they have an enormous audience. The same with Getting Hammered. The same with Dwayne's World. The same with Highly Concentrated Hugh. There's just a new media system. It's completely overwhelmed the old one. And no one is going to watch cable news from the left because they don't believe it. Its credibility is shot. Ann Selzer did not perhaps intend to destroy the last remnant of legacy media. But when she came out 2 days before the election and said Donald Trump was losing Iowa by 3 points and Donald Trump won by 12 points, that's it. Play taps. There isn't anyone that's going to believe anything from these people for a very long time. You're going to listen to me. You're going to listen to Chris DeGaulle. You're going to continue to listen to Gallagher, though you might not want to. And you're going to continue to support Angel Tree. Thank you for doing that. The banner's over at the newly resigned HughHewitt.com, redesigned HughHewitt.com. Head over to HughHewitt.com, find the banner for Angel Tree, and then just poke around. You'll find everything that's there, but it's newly organized, and you'll love it. You will love it. I'm studying the polling out of Canada. If they have a snap election, if Trudeau resigns, and he's just getting pummeled, he may hang in there because he didn't lose a vote of no confidence yesterday, but the demands that he resign are mounting because he's such a buffoon. The modeling is the Conservatives would have 252 seats. The BQ would have 60. The NDP would have 20. The Libs would have 10. And the Greens would have 1. So it would be the kind of wipeout of the left that happened to the Tories in Great Britain. So Canada will come into the column. Trump will get some support. Now, yesterday, the House agreed on a CR that was published last night. It's 1,500 pages long. It's nobody's idea of a good way to end this Congress. But Democrats run the Senate, and Republicans run the House, and you need the four corners. I don't like the bill. Nobody likes the bill. But I don't really think the bill matters that much. What matters is the budget and reconciliation. I was asked this by Brett last night on Special Report, cut number 14.
Hugh, that's the key, is because Trump may have to weigh in here to keep everybody, all the cats herded together, because there are people that are upset the way it's written now, but they are making the message, let's get to the new Congress and then we control what happens.
And I think that's why I like the press conference so much yesterday by the president-elect, is he basically is saying, we're all together here, let's get to January and let's get the budget and reconciliation done. Let's not blow ourselves up over the CR.
But you're a little skeptical of the two approach.
I am. I'm very skeptical of it, but I'm being overruled by people like John Thune and Speaker Johnson because they're in control and they know more than I do. So whatever the president says is what they're going to do. He's going to get all of his nominees. He's going to get a good fresh start. I think it's going to be a great takeoff for the second term.
That is very optimistic. All of his nominees.
I do believe that. And I'm not a big Bobby Kennedy Jr. fan. I don't know anything about Tulsi Gabbard. A lot of people I know say she's earned the right to be heard. But RFK Jr. is not my cup of tea. He's a leftist. He's a greenie. He is unusual, but he helped Trump win. And so Trump has given him a shot. And the great thing people have to remember is that a cabinet official requires Senate confirmation to enter into their job, but the president can fire them in one day. So if RFK does anything that's completely nuts, and Donald Trump's just going to pull his chain, he's going to be gone. So I just think it's not worth the candle. What matters is budget and reconciliation. That is what matters. And that, by the way, back to the one bill versus two bill, my friends at Americans for Prosperity, who are sponsors of our show, are one bill advocates. I'm a one bill advocate. There's a process by which reconciliation can be done twice in a year or once in a year. And the reality is Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson are two bill people right now. And Donald Trump hasn't said one or two, and so I'm assuming he has said your best judgment. And their best judgment is two budgets and two reconciliations, and put the tax extension into the second. I'm going to talk with Chairman Jason Smith of Ways and Means later about the argument for one, which is the argument for economic growth. It's the argument that we don't want to do 1982 again. I can actually remember we had this big win in 1980, just like the win we just had. And then in 1982, Republicans got crushed because the Reagan tax cut did not kick in until after the assassination attempt of former President Reagan outside the Washington Hilton. It didn't pass until he got back. Jim Jeffords jumped. Everything screwed up. And it took a long time to take off and get momentum. Americans for Prosperity know that too. They have institutional memory, and they remember you really want to get an economic recovery going early. And they're afraid that one bill is the preferred way to go, but that two bills are winning. We'll talk with Jason Smith about that. Joined by one of the Democrats who occasionally comes along to join me and talk a little politics, Senator Chris Coons of the great state of Delaware, one of the reasonable Democrats. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back. Merry Christmas to you.
Good morning, Hugh. Merry Christmas. It's a great last week here in the Senate as we take up and vote on a number of important bills this week. It's good to be on with you again.
Well, thank you. I want to begin by asking you about a matter of agreement. You are a hawk on China. I'm a hawk on China. Last time that President-elect Trump was on the program, he promised to try and get Jimmy Lai out. Do you think that will be a bipartisan effort with the Chinese Communist Party by both Republicans and Democrats?
Yes, I've worked across the aisle on a number of different issues to strengthen our efforts to both deter countries from taking Americans hostage or wrongfully detaining them or arresting them, and to help support the families and those hostages once they're released. Hugh, it might surprise you, actually it might not surprise you, that the first thing that an American gets when they come back from being held hostage for years overseas is a bill from the IRS. Your unpaid taxes, including fines and fees,
I did not know
is
that.
the first thing you get. And I have a bipartisan bill that has passed the Senate unanimously, and we're trying to get it through the House. Same thing with your credit score. If you think about Paul Whelan, for example, the Marine who was held in Russia for years, or three Americans who were recently released from China, or Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter who was released from Russia. When they come home, if it's been a long time, their credit score is ruined. They're facing tens of thousands of dollars of tax fines and fees. And this is not a huge number of people. This is something we should do for Americans who are deemed wrongfully detained and imprisoned, and make sure that when they come home, they and their families get the welcome and the support they deserve, not a tax bill.
Now, there is bipartisan agreement there, but I want to go back to Jimmy Lai, who's not, of course, American. He's a British citizen, and he's a Chinese citizen, but he's probably the world's most famous dissident, and Xi doesn't want to let him go. Do you think Trump can get him out?
I certainly hope so. The person who's been named to be his new special envoy for hostage affairs, Adam Bowler, is someone I worked well with when he led the DFC in the first Trump administration. We've already talked about the tools that we might be able to give him legislatively to strengthen his deterrent capabilities and to make sure that we're taking care of families. So I certainly hope so. It's a case I'll be digging into and making sure I can work with who I think will likely be our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And I'm meeting later this week, I believe, with Elise Stefanik, excuse me, who's been nominated to be our UN ambassador. The core team that Trump is putting forward to be National Security Advisor, UN ambassador, and Secretary of State are folks I look forward to meeting with and, where possible, working with.
I think that's good news. On national security, it's good news. Now I want to talk some politics with you. You might be old enough to actually have worked with Charles Manat in some capacity. I did. I knew him in California. Did you know Charles Manat at all?
I certainly knew who he was. I don't remember if I met him in the 80s, but I certainly knew who he was.
He took over your party in 1981, and he stayed for 4 years. And then Paul Kirk took it over, and he stayed for 4 years. And then Ron Brown came, he stayed for 4 years. Democrats were out of power for 12 years after President Carter because of inflation. Do you think your party is in for that long of an exile from executive branch authority?
I certainly hope not, but it's going to come down to whether we show that we are listening to the message of this election. Across 7 swing states, 240,000 votes, if they moved, from President-elect Trump to Vice President Harris across the 3 key states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, we'd be talking about inaugurating Vice President Harris. So this was not a crushing loss, but it was broad, and deep in certain demographics that Democrats expect to come out and vote for us. They're not listening to what we're saying, and there's some issues around certainly inflation, people believing that we're fighting for them and we're on their side, and people buying into our economic agenda and our overall agenda. So we could be in the wilderness for 12 years again if we don't listen, or we can show that we're open and humble and willing to work through the lessons of this election. If that happens, I think you could see a fairly quick turnaround.
Now, there are 2 areas, Senator. One is gender ideology, and the other is the border, about which I have not seen any Democrat express any willingness to deal with the reality of November. What do you think about both boys playing girls sports and building the wall on the border?
I think you'll see some Democrats eager, certainly willing to talk about border security and finding ways to make sure that we can tell our communities that folks who are crossing the border are doing so legally and having been screened appropriately. The idea that we have people who we can't trace and we don't know where they're from and we're not sure where they're going crossing our border is a national security risk. I'll remind you, there was a hard-fought, rough-hewn agreement between Senator Langford, a friend of mine, Senator Sinema, Senator Murphy, that Democrats were willing to vote for, that included significant investments in physical security at the border, increased funding for screening, for deportations, for the judicial system to expedite hearings for folks who are detained. I think you'll see some embrace of that direction. I do think there's a lot of concern. There is a lot of concern among Democrats about how broad mass deportations will go. Some of the talk among those in the president-elect's circle about undoing birthright citizenship or putting at risk those who've been here for decades and have businesses and families and are contributing members of society. If President Trump prioritizes finding and deporting those who commit crimes in the United States, he'll get enthusiastic support. If he prioritizes securing the border in a way that allows us to know who's coming across our border, he'll get support.
Now, Senator, what about boys playing girls sports?
We had a hearing yesterday in the Senate on sports gambling. And while I wasn't at that hearing, what was reported back to me was that in a question about that, how big of an issue is this? The head of the NCAA said out of 50,000 active sports-playing college students, there are fewer than 100 who are transgender NCAA athletes. I understand why it raises concerns for parents and for athletes. And I think our challenge in talking about and engaging around trans issues is first to recognize that young people who have gender dysphoria are some of the most vulnerable, some of the most often abused and picked on, some of the most likely to commit suicide of young people in America. And we should have this conversation about trans young people and young adults with some empathy and some respect. At the same time, I understand as a parent who had children in sports how there are concerns by parents and there are concerns by athletes. And I think this is something that's much more amenable to local solutions and to communities making that decision than a mandated federal standard.
You know, Senator, I realize that the left side of your party doesn't want clarity on this, but I do think you're going to stay in the exile until there's clarity on this. But I don't want to belabor the point. I want to go to the disintermediation of the narrative. I am curious, Senator. I listen to 7 podcasts whenever they come up. Those 7 are Ruthless, Commentary, The Editors, The McCarthy Report, Getting Hammered, Call Me Back, and Megyn Kelly. Those are not in the Salem world. I get no profit from those. That's not highly concentrated. It's not Dwayne's world. Of those 7, do you listen to any of them?
No, I don't. And right there might be part of the message about how Democratic elected officials need to broaden the aperture of what media they're listening to and where they're going on. I frankly listen to almost no podcasts. I'm a dinosaur. I still read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, watch the evening news, and, read things like The Economist and Foreign Affairs. And I recognize that part of the message of this election was for voters under 30, that's not where they're getting their news. And so what we're saying, they're not hearing.
Now, Senator, I'm older than you, and I do not miss
by
a half dozen years.
I'm not as flexible and agile as you are, Hugh.
Well, that might be the case, but you're pretty flexible. I've seen you get on the Acela. But do you even know what the Ruthless podcast is?
No, I don't.
All right, so it's the 4 guys all work for McConnell. They're McConnellite people, and they're pros, and they work in politics, and they're funny. It's NC-17, by the way. Commentary Magazine, you must know, and John Podhoretz and his colleagues sit down every morning for an hour. This is you guys have Pod Save America, but that's over the left edge of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I also don't listen to Pod Save America, so.
Well, I'm just curious. Right now, they're having this election for the DNC, and you've got a guy from Minnesota and a guy from Wisconsin and maybe Rahm Emanuel. Are any of those people, I mean, do they inspire confidence in you that they know how to navigate the crumbling of legacy media, which has been, in my opinion, probably not yours, the bulwark of the Democratic Party has been that you've owned the legacy media for so long and now it doesn't matter anymore?
I do think that is one of the core questions on the mind of the folks who will be voting for the next DNC chair is who's got a strategy, who is aware of what this challenge is, who's got a strategy for how to deal with it, and who can move out quickly. Not just to fantasize about, our creating our own podcast or our own, broadcast. There was an attempt at that to create a cable channel to compete with Fox. That's not really the issue. The issue is to meet voters where they are and to listen to them and to listen to the outlets that speak to them. I have 25-year-old twin boys. Both of them listen to Joe Rogan. I don't listen to Joe Rogan. And if I want to better understand what happened in this election and what moved young men, I recognize that folks like me who are considering election and from my party need to be consuming a broader range of media. More importantly, Hugh, it's about doing town halls and connecting with people where they are. The legacy media is no longer what drives our national narrative and is no longer dominant. Trump really was in part made possible. His ascendancy was facilitated by Twitter. And social media and its impact on elections in the United States and globally is something we all have to grapple with and figure out what a TikTok world means. I'll remind you that in countries around the world, we're seeing influence in the outcome of elections using social media that sometimes is just reflecting what the popular will is and what people want, and sometimes reflects action by hostile foreign agents.
Oh yeah, look. I want TikTok banned. I hope the president-elect doesn't go back on that. But I do think candor and directness and authenticity on issues that divide 80-20 is the only way back to your party. And I don't hear it yet, Senator. But I'm awfully glad to have you and Ro Khanna continuing to visit me every now and then so we can talk across the aisle. I appreciate your time this morning. Senator Chris Coons, one of the reasonable Democrats. Wrong but not rotten, as I like to say. Olivia Beavers with Politico joins me. Good morning, Olivia. Merry Christmas to you. I don't know if you are staying in town for the holidays. You're going home. Are you staying here?
I'm going home. I'm going to brave the drive down to Virginia, but at least I don't have to worry about a flight. And as tradition, usually my dad goes deep into our woods and cuts a tree, and that becomes our pretty ugly Christmas tree. So looks a little
Charlie
bit more
Brown
like Charlie
trees
Brown.
are fine by me. Are you glad that they wrapped up the CR last night? I'm disappointed in it. It doesn't have the AM radio in every car and every vehicle act in it. So I'm disappointed in it. They went after the pharmacy benefit manager. I'm not sure who won. I mean, who's happy this morning with this CR?
The farmers, the agriculture sort of industry Republicans are very happy with how this bill turned out. They were pushing for a series of different things, including ethanol year-round sales nationwide, and disaster aid and aid to farmers, and they were able to secure those. But of course, some of those provisions that people like Zach Nunn were pushing and Don Bacon, who wanted have more sort of farm industry, that's not settling so well with some conservatives who are very much unhappy with what they're seeing. Now, Mike Johnson is presenting it as a small CR, but it's essentially a Christmas tree. It's decorated with different sort of pieces of policy that they're throwing in there. Like you said,
it's not a Christmas tree for those of us in AM radio. I mean, I really hate this bill because I thought we were going to win the AM radio in every vehicle act. Tell me, though, I have Jason Smith and Zach Nunn coming up next hour. I want to talk to Jason Smith about one bill or two bills for budget and reconciliation. Which way is it trending, Olivia, in the House?
So we've been waiting to see what Donald Trump is going to weigh in and say. And there was some, rumors that maybe he will weigh in his speech earlier this week about which path he wants to take. Stephen Miller and some of his allies, including also the House Freedom Caucus, are pushing for a two-track path. Now, Jason Smith is saying, hey, if we want to do Donald Trump's tax cuts, we have a very thin majority. We should do one big one and basically create a system where they can get it passed in the House. And so I think Smith has pushed back against the way that Senator Thune has proposed. And I've been trying to bug Jason Smith for an interview, so it looks like you beat me to the punch on that. But we do not know which way it's going to go. But at the moment, there seems to be some Trump allies really pushing for the two-track system, which would push, border.
Tune in next hour. I've heard Assistant to the President Miller make his argument. He's never said two bills. He's always said we must have a border bill. And I'm with him on that, but why would they not do one bill, Olivia? I really don't get it, because if you want to avoid getting blown out in 2026, you've got to have the economy growing. The economy doesn't start growing until the tax cuts are locked in, right?
Yeah, I think some of it's a matter of timing, because doing the just even writing for the tax cuts, I think that's going to take a while, and it's going to be probably a couple months until they're more ready to move on that, whereas there are some who are pushing for there to be more money for the border and border security, and they want that earlier into Trump's administration so it can get moving on that, is the way that I think it's sort of been framed to me.
It's amazing to me, Olivia. We are losing, we being Republicans, not you. You are not partisan. We are losing the 2026 election right now by not having a conversation and settling the tax issue right now and passing it, because it takes a while for tax bills to impact economic growth. Does anyone bring this, that we're losing 2026 as we speak?
No, I think Republicans are still on a high of coming off of the election and say, we have a mandate to enact Donald Trump's policies. And I think that they're feeling pretty good about themselves. I think there is generally sort of an expectation that Republicans could risk losing the House, just understanding how that flip tends to happen when you have a Republican in the White House and then the House, 2 years in tends to flip, and vice versa. But no, there's definitely more of a positive sentiment on Capitol Hill right now.
That's good. People should enjoy the win, but there's no reason that they can't sit down in a room and figure out what the one big bill is. But I've lost the argument. I said on special report last night, Senator incoming Majority Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, they want two. I want one. The only way we get one is if Donald Trump says one, right?
That's my impression. I think that if Donald Trump weighed in and said that's what he wants, then you'd see Speaker Johnson saying that's what they should do. Johnson has sort of been a little bit more hands off and sort of letting other people make those play calls. But I think if Donald Trump weighed in, he'd be pushing that, whatever Trump.
It is the president-elect's party. He gets to make this case. I'm not sure, Stephen Miller clearly speaks for him on the border. I'm not sure he speaks for him on 1 versus 2 budget bills. But Olivia, thank you. I will in fact have Zach Smith next hour. Zach Nunn and Jason Smith next hour. I'll find out about the farm bill. I'll find out about 1 versus 2 bills because we make the news here and Politico reports it. Thank you, Olivia. Last night, a congressional resolution came out of the House of Representatives that will probably fly through the Senate this week, and then everyone's going to go home. To discuss that and other matters, Congressman Zach Nunn joins me. He's from Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. He is a center-right Republican like me. He's kind of like David Joyce, my hometown congressman. Zach Nunn, welcome. Good to have you, Colonel. And I say Colonel because you're still active duty Iowa Air Force Reserve, aren't you?
Yeah, Hugh. Good morning and happy holidays to all the listeners out there. Thanks for what you do. Continuing to serve in the U.S. Air Force Reserve as a colonel here, probably the more enjoyable of the 2 jobs, but both of them, at this point, very important for helping the American people. So we're all on board here out of Iowa.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the CR that came out. It's 1,500 pages. What do I like about it? Submarines got a lot of money, both Columbia and Virginia class. I do not like the fact that it omits the AM Radio in Every Vehicle Act. But I gather the farmers won, so I gather you had a hand in this last night.
Brother, we were all on board for the farmers, and you know this. Iowa is an ag district, but as I said to my Republican colleagues yesterday, every district in America is an ag district. Whether you're growing it, whether you're eating it, whether it's part of our national security plan, hugely important. And we were able to get $100 billion in disaster aid, and this is everything from the horrible hurricane fallout in places like eastern North Carolina to the Panhandle, to what's going on across the country, including my own hometown of Iowa, where we have had just disastrous tornadoes, acts of God that go beyond budget planning and really destroy communities. The other aspect of this, we got $10 billion specifically for farm credit. Look, this is the 3rd year in a row where farmers have taken a bath on commodity prices being below where the actual crop is. And the challenge is I've got great friends in rural communities across the country. We've got 87,000 small farmers in Iowa, and we're looking at, my friends Skip and Pat, who are going to have to liquidate their farm and say no more plow in the field this spring. That can't happen. When we lose 87,000 family farms in a place like Iowa or the hundreds of thousands of farms across America, that means we get into big ag, which is candidly exactly what the Democrats would like to have, one big ag sector that they can directly rule, or we end up losing out, as we have with some of our specialty crops, to places overseas, and we become a net importer in America, not just of fuel, but of food, and this becomes very dangerous. A couple of the other things we're very excited about, year-round E15, this is something that comes out of biofuels. Now it can be sold nationwide. Let's let free markets do it. It's voluntary, but it also helps domestic production of energy, drives down supply chain costs, and also complements what we've got in traditional fuels for something that's a little bit cleaner overall.
Now, Congressman Nunn, every one of your farmer friends in Iowa listen to the Farm Report every morning on their AM radio. Why did the AM Radio in Every Vehicle Act not get through? I'm told, it's whispered to me, Hakeem Jeffries didn't want it. Why do we care what Hakeem Jeffries wants? We need to protect the emergency broadcast system.
Generally, AM radio is one of the best ways. I know that's what I'm listening to when I'm taking my 6 kids back and forth to school in the morning. equally important, it's one of the best safeguards, whether you've got any impending natural disaster, an emergency happening, or drones flying over New Jersey. We need somebody who can help get to ground truth on these things. Now, I will say there was a lot of negotiation going on in the bill, and I think the Speaker, to his credit, took on major issues that he knew he had to get in here to get a Republican-led bill that would make both the Senate Republicans, House Republicans, as well as tee up President Trump for success. I'm fully confident President Trump wants to be the first to sign that AM radio bill into law, so let's let him take that victory lap on it. He'll be there with us. Hugh, one of the other things I want to highlight that's, I think, really important in this is something that a bill we've been working on for a while. It's called beneficial ownership, and it's our first pushback on a federal government which has really harmed small and medium businesses. And these aren't just farmers, this is every business in America. There's a rule that will go into effect on day 1 of January 1st, 2025, that will charge every small business who fails to self-report of the government regulations that they are non-compliant with a tune of $500 per day per infraction, with a fine of up to 3 years imprisonment if you fail to hit this. The federal government has touted that they've informed and received feedback from nearly 7 million small businesses. But Hugh, I'm here to tell you there are over 35 million small businesses across America who would immediately be impacted by this. And it's really a way for the bureaucracy to fleece hardworking, everyday mom and pop Main Street shops to be able to get a little more money in, and in some cases, put folks in prison who they've targeted. This continuing resolution will extend this for a year so that we, as a Republican majority in the House, Senate, and with the president, can finally get rid of this level of bureaucratic
That is
overreach.
good news. I am actually a small business. The Hugh Hewitt Show is an LLC, and I am very, very glad that you passed that, because I was getting those notices, and I don't want to deal with that, and I'm glad you passed that. Let me ask you about a little inside baseball, Zach Nunn. The House Intel Committee has lost Mike Gallagher, and it's going to lose Michael Waltz, and I don't know who else. Do you want to be on House Intel? Have we named House Intel for next year? Because I like talking to people on House Intel. They're usually very serious, and they end up telling me stuff even when they don't tell me stuff.
Well, here's what we know. We've got a great and deep bench on House Intel Committee. Our very own Elise Stefanik is also going off to become ambassador to the United Nations and hold our adversaries accountable. We're going to end up with some real gaps on House Intel. We have a great chairman. We even have a great ranking member on the Democrat side, Jim Himes, as well as Mike Turner. You know, our background lends itself to this. We are privileged to be serving on financial services for the insurance sector in Des Moines, Iowa, the Ag Committee with Ag in Iowa. But, you know, as a 20-year counterintelligence officer, as somebody who has worked operations in both China and Russia, as somebody who has focused specifically on emerging threat technologies, including in cyber and what we're seeing coming out of communist Beijing, we would be privileged to have that opportunity. But this is a speaker's decision, and the best thing we can do right now is serve our district and serve leadership in a way that actually gets accomplishments over the finish line in a pragmatic way. That's what we're going to be continuing to do. And if the speaker calls us up, we're ready to fire on day 1.
Well, let me ask you something, Congressman Colonel. If you're on Intel, will you come on weekly like Waltz has been doing? Because I've always had Gallagher, then I had Waltz. I like having someone from House Intel. I can go try and get Crenshaw, but he's a Texan, so he's gone sometimes. You're more likely to be around. When do we find out about this?
Yeah, Hugh, I would love to not only join you every week, but I think it's important with a classified committee that the things that are unclassified, we get out there, we share, and we highlight the importance of this. This can be anything from, you know, Chinese balloons flying over and getting some real fidelity on this.
The drones.
We got to be able to have conversations. I expect that we will elect our speaker promptly in January, and then the speaker's timeline is in the coming spring to help fill those, you know, 4 or 5 open slots on Intel quickly, because what we don't want are gaps in coverage on critical information that's a direct national security threat to us.
What do you think about the drones, Congressman?
Look, we have been working as an Air Force guy on a number of pro-U.S.-made drone technologies that we are including in the National Defense Authorization Act. Happy to lead that with our great innovators here in America. But we're also pushing back on the amount of Chinese technology that's being included in drone apparatus that's being used even by our law enforcement and first responders. Nearly 90% of all drone hardware or software is produced in China, and they just have been on the leading edge in this. Challengingly, we have seen a lot of drone technology coming out of our near-peer adversaries. The Iranians launched hundreds of drones against Israel with the intent to cause mayhem, death, and destruction. And tragically, they ended up killing 3 U.S. service members just earlier this year. The other part of this, which I find equally frustrating, Hugh, is we have an administration that started this year by not being honest with the American people about a Chinese balloon that flew over our entire country. And now this week they have told us that the New Jersey State Police have been wrong when they said they intercepted a drone, that the U.S. Coast Guard is not telling the truth when they reported dozens of drones trailing a Coast Guard cutter off New Jersey, and that everybody from the governor of New Jersey to kids on the Jersey Shore are candidly flat out wrong, because the White House has now said there's nothing to see here and we won't corroborate any of it. This is a challenge. We have a lack of faith that the Biden administration truly knows what's going on, that they're being candid with the American people. And I think that's even more of the crux of this, is that we, living in a post 9/11 world, when you see something, you say something, and we expect our government to be communicating across all bands, none of that's happening. We have a White House which is broken, and we have a federal government which is reporting one thing in New Jersey, another thing in Ohio when they just shut down Wright Air Force Base to drone. Yep. And then other folks who are just candidly not getting an answer that the American people deserve.
Well, I hope you are successful in that. I talked to Senator Cotton, who's the incoming chair of Senate Intel, and he was waiting for a briefing. And I was talking about it with Brett Baer on Special Report last night. The information vacuum is sucking in all sorts of conspiracy nuts. I would just like to know if it's us, if it's our Air Force and Navy developing stuff, great. And if it's not us, tell us. Zach Nunn, congrats on getting your farmers taken care of. Just don't forget AM radio next year and keep coming back. I hope you're on House Intel. Thank you, Colonel. I hope you have entered to join the Salem Media ticket giveaway. We are giving away a trip for 2 to the inauguration of President-elect Trump, 2 tickets to the inauguration itself ceremony, 2 tickets to an inaugural ball, and of course, your airfare and your hotel will be covered. But you have to enter to win. Text Trump to 94878. That's TRUMP. Text Trump to 94878, and you'll be entered. Let me also remind you, over at HughHewitt.com, you will find the Angel Tree banner. And I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to ask you tomorrow and Friday and Monday and Tuesday, right up to Christmas Eve, because they can keep doing this. The more donations come in, the more children get Christmas presents. And $30 takes care of one child who has mom and or dad in prison. They make a list, they send it to Santa, but of course Santa is Angel Tree, and Angel Tree is Santa's elf, and they take it to mom or dad, and mom or dad picks something and writes a note to the kid, so that present doesn't come from Santa, that present comes from their imprisoned mother or father. Makes a world of difference. They connect with the Angel Tree volunteer, they get a youth Bible as well, and they're connected into an organization that will take care of them and see to them. So please be generous. Thank you. Thousands of you have stepped up, and I appreciate it. I really do. Head over to HughHewitt.com. The banner is at the top. You will not see there Don's Early Light, but if you go to my YouTube channel, you can hear the interview I did yesterday with Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is a sponsor of our program. Kevin, though, is a friend. I've known him since he came to town 3 years ago. He and I have both done warm-up work for the president-elect. Last time I saw Kevin, we were doing warm-up work at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention with the crowd that was eager for the former and future president to come in. Kevin used his time better than I did, and he wrote a good book, Don's Early Light. It is a guide to what is going to happen in D.C. in the near term and the long term, and Don's Early Light is a message of freedom now and forever. And Kevin Roberts is key. You know who's endorsed it on the back, for those of you who listen to this program? Dr. Larry Arnn says Kevin shows the way. So if you're a Hillsdale dialogue lover or a Hillsdale graduate, you got to realize Larry Arnn doesn't do a lot of book blurbs, but he blurbed Don's Early Light because he really believes in Kevin Roberts. Joined by Chairman Jason Smith. He helms the Ways and Means Committee in the House. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Hugh. It's great to be with you as always.
Now, I always turn to Missourians for clear thinking. Like Jim Talon is on every week. Tim Garrison is a friend of mine. Senator Blunt was a friend of mine when he was serving. So I just want some clarity on the House and whether or not you're going to go with one budget and reconciliation process or 2. I have been a big proponent of 1, but I think I'm losing the argument. Where are we?
You know, Hugh, I'm with you. I'm in a big proponent of one. I believe a more comprehensive package allows us to get the quickest and best wins quickly for President Trump. But it appears to me that, I've said all along, I'll do whatever President Trump decides that he wants us to go. And I believe that the Speaker and the leader of the Senate are all on the page of 2 versus 1. And if that's the case, I'm going to do everything I can to help execute the president's priorities. But it's just like a roadmap. There's numerous different roads you can take to the end destination. There's one that's the quickest and best, but there's a lot of other options. It may take longer, may be a little bit more difficult, but we'll get it done.
Now, Chairman, the reason I've argued for one is that I remember 1982, because I'm old enough, and the Republicans got wiped out after their big win in 1980 because the Reagan tax cuts did not pass until the spring of that year. Jim Jeffords jumped, there was no follow-up, and the boom that we needed didn't take hold in time. Do any of your colleagues realize that if they wait 3, 4, 5 months, they're giving away the House majority in 2026, perhaps?
You know, Hugh, last night I was raising that argument with the Speaker and other members of my of the House of Representatives. If you look at just 2017, when we passed the Trump tax cuts, it was in December. It wasn't out straight out of the gate. Instead, we used a reconciliation bill that was unsuccessful on health care. We need to give certainty to the markets. We need to give certainty to small businesses. There's 26 million small businesses that are fearful if their tax rate's going to increase 20 percentage points. And that is determining how that they will invest, how they will grow, how many employees are going to have. And Congress should not kick the can down the road. We need to deliver. And it's pretty easy. President Trump has been very clear. He wants permanency of the expiring provisions of his Trump tax cuts in 2017. He wants no tax on tips, overtime pay, no tax on Social Security for seniors, and also looking at ways to incentivize manufacturing in the United States. These are things that the Ways and Means Republicans have been working on since April to deliver on, and we can do it. Just give us the opportunity.
Well, that's what I want to go back to, because I understand the argument is over SALT, and that there's a great division in the Republican conference over the state and local taxes deduction. I was one of those who argued with the old Congress, don't limit it to the way you're going to, because we're going to get wiped out in the blue states. And we did get wiped out in the blue states. And maybe that's a difficult negotiation. But can't you do everything other than SALT and then come back to SALT in a second reconciliation?
No. Unfortunately, the members from New York, New Jersey, California, those SALT states will hold out and will not vote for any reconciliation package. From my understanding, at least that's the red flags that they are giving, unless it is fixed. If you recall, at the end of 2025, when we have the expiration of all the Trump tax cuts, also what expires is that $10,000 cap. So the SALT caucus is very favorable of seeing that $10,000 cap to expire at the end of the year.
Well, then we're playing Russian roulette, because if we go that late in the year, there will be no way to avoid losing the House in 2026. I mean, doesn't it? It's just a negotiation. Can't you hammer it out now?
Absolutely. That's why I said that we need to do it now instead of waiting until later, because we can accomplish it now. We should not kick the can down the road, and we should do it now, Hugh. You're exactly right.
Well, I've heard Assistant to the President Stephen Miller make a very emphatic case for border action, and I agree with him. I know we need the military rebuild. I'm glad they passed the money in the CR for the submarines last night. But are people reading too much into Mr. Miller's very successful messaging about the border, and perhaps Donald Trump needs to speak directly on this issue? Because I haven't heard him say one way or the other. And I do think he does not want to lose the House in 2026, does he?
He absolutely does not want to lose the House in 2026, Hugh. If he did, there would be an attempted impeachment every day. That's what happened whenever the Democrats controlled the House the last time, and it was so obstructive to the good policies that President Trump was trying to advocate and push for. Stephen Miller's doing a great job working for the president, communicating for the president. He's a friend of mine. We just disagree on the approach here, but Hugh, we have to secure our border. We have to remove criminals from this country. And we also need to make sure we have proper energy policy, that we have the tax policy, but also spending cuts. And all of that could easily be done in one bill. It may take the Senate a little bit longer, but put the pressure on the Senate. The House can deliver in a comprehensive tax package with energy, border, spending cuts. Make the Senate also deliver.
Wait, now this is news to me. I was told that the House could not agree. And I've had incoming leader Thune on. He's a friend of mine, and I know he's a two-bill guy. But in the background, not from Senator Thune, in the background is your team in the House can't get it together to send one bill to the Senate. Is that just wrong?
That's completely wrong. The House is the one that can pass a comprehensive bill. It's the Senate that says that they need more time to pass a comprehensive bill, that they need to look at tax. Hugh, we have been working on tax with the House Ways and Means Republicans since April. We've been planning for a trifecta form of government, and people criticized us over here, thinking there's no way Donald Trump can win, and we can also have the House and Senate. Well, guess what? They were wrong, and we're prepared. It's very simple to put the tax priorities forward. The president's been extremely clear. Make permanency of his expiring tax provisions, address no tax on tips, address overtime, address tax on Social Security for seniors, and figure out ways to incentivize manufacturing in the United States. We've been working on numerous different proposals. We can deliver on that in the House if it is one big comprehensive package. But you know what? Regardless if it's one or two, Hugh, I'm going to work my tail off to deliver for the president, because that is not only delivering for the president, it's delivering for 77 million Americans who supported him, supported the agenda, and they have been suffering under the last 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration.
If we went with one bill, Congressman, what does the House version of the compromise on SALT look like? Because that's the big sticking point. Everyone wants the taxes on tips gone, all the other things. There's no disagreement in the caucus, but there's disagreement on SALT. What's the compromise look like in the House?
Yeah, well, that hasn't been completely decided, but I'll tell you, we've been working with the SALT caucus for almost a year, and we're definitely going to have to increase the $10,000 cap. What that number is hard to tell. We've been analyzing what is the average SALT deduction for the median income household in various congressional districts. And so it does need to get increased. But let me tell you, it's expensive. Just increasing it a little can be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Whenever we put that $10,000 cap back in 2017, it saved about $800 to $900 billion, and that's the same as today. However, 10,000 cap is not going to be something that the SALT caucus will agree to, and we can't lose one vote. We have the smallest majority in the House of Representatives since before any Congress, before World War I. And so we're going to have to listen to everyone. But I think that increasing it to what would be close to the average in these congressional districts is a good way to go.
Yeah. I don't envy you your job. I barely made it through tax in law school. I wandered out of the tax final exam like my Gallipoli, so I don't really know tax policy. I'm not going to pretend to. But it doesn't seem to me politically very difficult. If the tax bill gets passed early, the economy takes off more quickly. We grow our way out of the deficit. We grow our way out of our energy production. But we've got to get started. And I am afraid. I wonder, do you guys talk about acts of God and losing the majority? Because we could lose the majority by the time you get around to Bill 2.
That's exactly right. Unfortunately, I've seen numerous of my colleagues be in car crashes and lose their life. Other individuals have health issues. And when you're looking at a majority that's going to be nearly around 217 to 215 whenever the president's appointments get confirmed. That's a very, very razor thin majority. So don't take any risk. And also, you never know. You never know what members will do from time to time. And let's act early. Let's get the job done for the American people. The certainty that extending these tax cuts, what it can do for small businesses and working families and farmers, what it can do to the economy. You know, if we just grow the GDP 1 percentage point over the next 10 years, that will bring in $3 trillion of revenues into the federal government that will help reduce those deficits. And we saw that when we passed the Trump tax cuts in 2017. The 2 years following passage of the Trump tax cuts, we saw over a 1% GDP growth, and then COVID hit. So imagine if COVID would have never hit, what would have happened in that 10-year period.
So if President Trump comes out and says, I would like the tax cuts made permanent in the first budget reconciliation bill, I am hearing you say the Republicans in the House can do that. It's up to the Senate to pass it. Is that correct? Am I hearing it correctly, Mr. Chairman?
It's exactly right. If that's what President Trump came out and said he wants one comprehensive package to make sure the tax is in it, we will deliver in the House. I will not be going to sleep until we're able to cross the finish line to deliver for the president and for the American people. The American people deserve Congress to deliver for them, to create the certainty and make their lives better.
You know, I just don't, I really don't understand. They're going to end up with impeachment if we lose the House in 2026. And if we don't get this tax bill passed, the economy's not going to take off. So more power to you, Mr. Chairman. Make the argument one more time. I am with you, but I don't know that we're winning. I hope you go back in there and wrestle with the alligators a little bit more. I appreciate your time this morning. Jason Smith from the great state of Missouri.